The moment we've all been waiting for. Last round I played an international master, and this round I was paired against the highest honor a person can possibly achieve in chess, a Grandmaster. My opponent has over 40 years experience at this point, and we have 450 elo difference between each other. I originally was ranked 79th in this tournament, and now in the current standings I am 13th, tied for 10 with 4 out of 5, and I am undefeated in this tournament with 2 draws. Draws are very rare for me. Now my opponent is having a pretty bad tournament. My opponent has 3.5 out of 5 and lost to a 2100 earlier in the tournament. My opponent has the white pieces, I have black, and e4, e5 is played on the board. Knight f3, knight c6, and here I know that my opponent has played this for forever. So bishop b5, the re-Lopez, and I was anticipating bishop b5. Now, if a Grandmaster plays the re-Lopez against you, you best believe that they have a deep knowledge of a6, of knight f6. And so in this position, I had the crazy idea in my preparation to go for something I've never gone against a Grandmaster. A gambit, a type of opening in chess which offers a disadvantage from the get-go. This is called the Yanish gambit or the Schliemann's gambit. F5 is bad if white plays perfectly and knows their lines. You can take on f5, you can play knight c3. My opponent plays the second best move, which is d3. Very solid move, defending the pawn. So I trade here, and the idea for black is that we open the f file so that when I castle, my rook is directly on a semi-open file and is active in the position. I go with knight f6, which is the theory, and now castles. Bishop c5, and here, white has so many possibilities to play from. Knight c3, queen d3 is a sneaky option. If I castle, queen c4 is check and wins my bishop. Bishop g5 is another possibility. The best way to play here is bishop takes c6, b takes. I'll play it on the board. Bishop takes, b takes, knight takes, and now I go castles. And that is another form of the gambit. My opponent plays none of those moves, and actually plays a move that I don't know very well, and it is bishop c4. Playing a second time a piece in the opening, which is not recommended, but I guess Grandmasters break rules all the time. Bishop c4 slices through my position and prevents me from playing the most endearing and comfortable move, a castling move. My king cannot go to safety, which means that I want to go castles long from now on. So my plans have just shifted because of this bishop c4 move. So how to meet it? I don't know. Here I looked at 2 moves, queen e7 and d6 for quite a while. I first looked at d6 because it's the natural move to open up my bishop so that my queen can move and then I can castle. Looks pretty nice, right? Here I got very scared. White has knight g5, and this move gets scarier and scarier the more you look at it. Knight g5 threatens the fork, just like in the opening the fried liver, the fork on the queen and rook, which is completely winning. So I have to get one of my pieces out, and okay, if knight f7 now, I go rook f8 and this is completely neutralized. But here I got even more scared because there's a move bishop f7, which is check, and now my king can't castle forever. Actually, the engine likes this for black, which I didn't see through. King f8 now threatens h6 and wins a piece here by disconnecting both pieces. So the white pieces would have to flock out of my position, and after vacating all these pieces, I now have a lot of mustard counter-attacking here. I can even take here on e4. And this is slight advantage for black, which is hard to see because your king is in the center. Nobody teaches you that king in the center is pretty good in this position. You have to just play and learn from it. A good learning experience. The second move I looked at was queen e7, and eventually I played this move. It is not a good move, as you can see the engine saying it, but against knight g5, it is a tremendous move because h6, and now this knight does not know where to go. On knight f7, I have rook f8, and this knight is trapped, and on bishop here, I win a piece because I can go king f8 and now I already have this trap set in and I'm winning a piece. So knight g5 is not acceptable, but here after a simple development move, my queen looks dramatically out of place. Let's say I let in bishop g5, knight e5 comes in and is extremely scary pin on my knight and queen. Here I play d6, my opponent goes bishop g5, and this is expected, but I come in time. I had calculated this and I'm fine here. I go bishop e6. And if you go knight d5, I just trade it off and we're done with it. And if you trade off my bishop, I have just developed very well and I can castle long or even maybe castle short. My opponent now takes 24 minutes of their time to play bishop takes e6. My opponent now has 53 minutes left on the clock after 10 moves. Just to put this in perspective, my opponent almost used half of his time in the first 10 moves of a potential 50 move game. Bishop takes e6. I'm very happy here because I can take with the queen, but after knight d5, it gets complicated for black. I can't take on d5 because pawn takes and this is a fork, I lose. Knight d5 is threatening a triple royal fork, and if I go castles long, which would be my redemption, knight takes c7 and I lose because of the fork. So I kind of have to castle long. If I go rook c8 and defend, this is extremely passive, and here my opponent can have resources with trading on f6, and now knight h4 with queen h5 coming in. And castling short does not look appetizing either on a completely open file. So I castle long here, and now we have opposite castled kings. My king is on the queen side, his king is on the king side, which means that we are due to be attacking each other for the rest of the game with pawn storms. c3 is played, super nice move. c3 is threatening b4, which is an accelerator to white's pawn storm, attacking my bishop, winning what we call in chess a tempo on my bishop. So here, I looked at a particular move. Knight takes e4, which actually the engine likes, but I didn't like that I sacked the exchange here and I have a little to no compensation for that. But the engine dislikes my position so much that the engine says, you go for it, bad boy, but I didn't go for it. I played rook dg8, and this is me preparing to storm out my pieces. My opponent goes with b4, the typical attack on my bishop, bishop b6, and now I was expecting a4. a4 is a really solid move that threatens a5 and my bishop is trapped. But I had a little resource here I thought of. On a5 threatening to trap my bishop, I have knight takes e4 here. If you trap my bishop, I can now grab a safety vote and go bishop takes f2, rook takes, and knight takes, king takes, and now I have two pawns and a rook for a knight and bishop. It's pretty good. And I thought of e4, rook f8, and things like this. Just capitalize on this weakness. So here a4 is impossible and my opponent takes an absurd amount of time to play queen d3. Queen d3 defends this pawn, but my opponent has 31 minutes left. From an hour and 30 minutes to 31 minutes after 14 moves, my opponent plays queen d3. And the idea is that you defend this and you threaten a4, a5, and this pawn slides through like butter. I'm scared. After the game, my opponent told me three things. One was that this is a mistake, which he was completely right about. And he said that this is no good because I have a variation that is actually quite good and survives. I looked at the variation, you guys. I looked at it. I just didn't like it. It's the obnoxious knight takes d5. It's such a weird move. Because here I'm letting my opponent fork me in exchange for a fork on you. And after the game I said, but like after knight takes d5, e takes d5, e4, and here I have a fork, and when the queen moves, I can just play queen moves and you destroy my king. But then he said, you destroy my king and it's equal here. Actually, I have a tiny advantage. And so this is the move, and this is an equal position from what is a disadvantaged position. So this would have been a safety move out. So instead I go with h6, which is me going into the attack. My plan was that if you go back, I go knight e7 and I pressure this knight. And on a4, I can get out of this mess with takes, and now queen g4. a5, I go e4 myself. and now I have some attacking things. So after h6, my opponent is inclined to take. If you go back here, I have g5, and now I gain the tempo, and I'm attacking with some wrath. So you take on f6, I take, and my rook is opened on the g-file, a really good element when you're attacking the opposite king. My opponent goes with g3, and this is the second thing my opponent told me after the game. He goes, g3 no good. g3 very weakening. g3 is very weakening. Look at these light squares glow up for especially my queen. Now I am all out attack in my philosophy. Here I'm only thinking of ways to attack. h5, I didn't like that it got met with h4. Queen h3, stomps on the white pieces, imposes with a strong piece, and now h5, h4 can ride down the board. And I calculated this extremely long line, and now I'm taking a lot of time myself. The other possibility other than queen h3 is knight e7, which is important to mention, but it just gives the advantage to white. Like, it just lets white, like, attack. On a6, probably a5, bishop a7, and now even collapsing my attack like this, but even b5, and I'm so uncomfortable, it's probably losing here already, but just takes queen b5, and then a6 is coming in. It's not looking good for the black pieces. So I didn't opt for knight e7, I opted for the very ambitious queen h3. Again, the engine doesn't like my attack, it says that black is too slow, so these are inaccurate moves here. My opponent goes king h1, the only and the best good move in this position. Other moves like a4 don't come in time because I have this really nice move, rook takes g3, which is my original threat. And here this pawn is pinned, so you have to take with the pawn. If you take with the king, I just win the knight. And so this is a fork. If you take my rook, I have queen takes g3 still on this pinned pawn, and if king h1, I have check, knight h2 gives the queen, so king g1, and now I have check here, and this is eventually checkmate. So queen h3 comes with some really tough threats on g3. King h1, however, gets out of this pin, and now rook takes g3 doesn't work anymore. So I go with h5, threatening h4, threatening to take. We're going in, all-out attack. If you're familiar with FIFA terms, b5 is played, and I saw this, I knew about this. This wins material for white, but I'm sure that my attack works. b5 attacks my knight, and if I go knight d8, if I move my knight, there's a fork on e7. And I had predicted b5 because it's such a good move, it wins material, and met it with h4. I'm literally sacking a knight. My opponent goes with takes, and now I go h takes. And by the way, at this point in the game, my opponent has like 20 minutes, and now I have 34 minutes. I've been taking a ton of time on this attack because I know that it's unsure here. If you are a little bit greedy in this position, you lose. Let's say you go knight e7 and you go for this fork. I can go king d8, this was obviously prepared by me, and now if you take black to play and win, pause the video to solve, there is a mate in 8 moves which I saw to the fullest, which is so cool. Here you don't want to take on h2, you don't want to play queen takes h2, there's no fancy thing. But there is a nice fork, g2 check, forcing the king here, and it's a bit more than a fork. Here you can take the rook with g takes f1 check. If queen takes, you have rook a takes g8. And now king h1, and the queen is off of this knight, so I can do check, queen here, and mate. And if you take with the rook out here, the queen defends this knight, but g2 is undefended, so check, king here, and checkmate. And that is why my opponent did not play this, because he's a GM, and played f takes g3. Note my opponent's patience. My opponent could have just taken with check, then taken with check, and then just played his game. But he didn't do that. He just took back here super calm, and I just liked that patience of it all. Rook takes g3. I'm threatening rook takes f3 with mate. My opponent takes on b6 with check. Finally, a takes, and now check. King takes, and now defends on h2. My opponent has a piece up from taking on c6. And the top engine, depth 24, says this is +2, but the lower depth engine says this is only +1. So black has chances because I have an array of pawns, my king is relatively okay, and this king is unsafe. So if I can get this king unsafe, more unsafe, I have some chances. I play f5, which is the best move in this position. If you take back, I can have queen takes f5, and yeah, it's pretty good. I can have e4 things in the future and stuff like that. My opponent goes rook f2. Now I go d5 after some thought, sacking a pawn for e4 to take the knight off. So takes, and I go e4. And now knight g1. After queen h6, queen d2, my last opportunity of the game, a rare inaccuracy by my opponent. Here the engine really wants black to trade queens, to win c3 and hopefully have a pretty good endgame. Since this is a weakness, and if this is a strength that you evaluate, the engine says that I can catch up here. Rook d3, rook g2, e3, and f7, rook d2, rook g8, and after rook f2, it's actually okay for black. It's kind of losing. White has a lot of work to do to win this though. And my pawns are flying down, and I'm threatening e2, e1. You have to play this. Rook f6, and this is not so obvious to play against. My rook is cutting off the king, and my pawns are sliding down the board. Good luck with your knight. Knight e2, c5 with d4, d3. It's coming along. I did not want to trade queens out of the principle that I'm down material, but this extra knight is actually not that strong, and that's what I misevaluated. I played queen d6, rook e1, threatening to take here. I played queen e5, and now I missed queen d4 is fine. Queen f4 forces a queen trade, but queen d4 is somehow a better move, because now if I move my queen, I best not give a rook on h8. So it kind of forces a queen trade as well. So I take, and after taking, this pawn is a bit too strong. I go try to fetch it, but I come too late because this pawn is too strong. f6. I play rook f8. My opponent plays f7. I play rook takes d4, knight h3 with knight g5 and knight e6 is very scary. I go c5, knight g5, I go rook a4, knight e6, I have to sack a rook because I'm losing that rook. King c6, and here after a few moves and rook d6, I resigned because my pawn is falling after king c4 and then rook check, or even just knight takes and then rook check. So it's completely losing, and in this position I resigned. My first loss of the tournament against a Grandmaster, and let me tell you, ending note, I played an FM, I played an IM, I played a GM. The last remaining title for me to play is a CM, and I play a CM in the last round of this tournament. So I played all titled players in this tournament, and I think I've done so far pretty well against them. Remains to be seen about the last round. Thank you so much for watching. I now have 4 out of 6 with my first loss, and tomorrow I play a strong 2192 from Ireland who is recently a candidates master. See you soon.